Brother, welcome to Rolling Through Negotiations podcast.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be on here.
I'm real keen to get this one out there for our listeners. While we were speaking in the warm-up, before we pressed record, I was sitting on the edge of my seat thinking, man, everyone wants to hear this. You guys want to hear this. So I'm really looking forward to this one and what you have to share. And I want to dive straight away into a bit of controversy, red hot onto a topic that we were just yarning about. And you were speaking about, you said something along the lines of, you're not sure if your rugby or real football career is something you want to go much into on the podcast. Something, it's probably a pretty poor paraphrase, but along those lines.
It was pretty poor, but it does.
So that's where I'll start, brother, on that spot where you say you don't want to go.
No, you're throwing straight me in. Yeah, what I was speaking about was, especially for those that are not familiar with rugby league and over here in New South Wales, but during my footy years, I played for 13 odd years across different clubs, and at those clubs, we're at the bottom. We're battling at the bottom to get off the bottom, and we had coaches that were sacked I had coaches that were sacked at 3 different clubs, and like I said there, I can't honestly say, and as I've grown up a bit and matured a little bit, I can't say all I could say was I wasn't an ultimate professional. I didn't help them stay in their job, and that's something that I think about a lot now I'm a little bit older.
Handling that controversy, brother. To go a little deeper on that and keeping the legal stuff in mind, the player contract and everything, the contractual term is probably expired, so we're all good there.
Yeah.
In all seriousness.
Yeah.
When you say you weren't the ultimate professional, I think that it's an interesting point because as people, we're always more than just a professional. Like whoever's listening to this podcast episode right now, we'd probably agree, you've got a professional side, you've got a family side, you've got a community side. There's many things we're involved in as people. And throughout our life, we evolve, we develop. When we're young, we probably do things that we wouldn't do when we get a bit wiser and a bit more mature.
Yeah.
So do you think that when you say not the ultimate professional, part of that was to do with the age and stage of life that you're in, and that journey has helped you learn and grow to become where you are today?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I'll take you back a bit here. I come from, I grew up across different communities with different people in different houses, and some of those houses weren't setting me up for success, to be totally honest, with some of the things that were happening in some of them homes. So, I went through and I got put in my nan's care, out in a remote community in Ivanhoe, far west New South Wales. And from there, different things happened, but I got signed up to go into the professional organisation, Melbourne Storm. I got signed up as a 16-year-old. And again, I still carried a lot of bad behaviour with me in some ways, drinking, fighting, getting in trouble, or drugs, even from a young age. So when I went to Canberra, I went to Canberra purely because my mum was moved there and I wanted to go there to look after I'll help my mum and my sisters at the time. And that's why I moved there. But again, my behaviour really didn't align or wasn't the best to be a professional athlete. I just didn't do things the best off the field. I didn't take care of myself. I relied a lot on my, as I was saying before, like my competitiveness, my just do whatever I took, do whatever I can to get a win or play footy. So, when I talk about it, I just wasn't the most professional. Most of my career, unfortunately, I look back on it and, I was lucky I had my wife that come into my life at the early stages when I was at the Raiders. It probably saved my career in some way, in a big way. But like I said, when you reflect, we get a little bit older and we look back on those times and you take a lot of those lessons. And, it took me a long time to grow up. And my biggest problem, just to go into this now where I'm into it, but, my ego, I guess, as a young kid going into money, getting signed by the Raiders from Melbourne on good money and not know how to handle money, still gambling, still drinking, still partying, and then still playing football, again, didn't give myself the best chance to be my best, during those years.
I think when we speak of the best, that's a really interesting
Yeah.
point. I remember as a young boy growing up and then as a teenager as well, hearing my mum say, Matthew, do your best, do your best.
Yeah.
And I used to reflect on that and think, well, how can I actually do my best? Because what is my best in one point of time may not be even anywhere close to what my best and real potential is.
And that's right. Like, and again, when you don't have the experiences or the education or the good mentors around you to actually tell you and shape you to be your best, or actually understand what that looks like to work towards that, you drop the ball a lot, if you want to say in footy terms. You get it wrong, and you take your lessons from it and you improve. And I guess for me, it took me a long time to learn from those lessons and get to a point. And, I guess for the listeners, you could look even towards the back end of my career when I was at Manly. As I was saying, I was club hopping. I was chasing contracts. This is negotiation contracts, but I was going to different clubs, and I landed at Manly. And towards that period there, even from those lessons and those mistakes, I was experiencing. I still got it wrong where I nearly lost my life because of a head injury. I went on a alcohol and drug bender and hit my head, and I was in hospital for weeks. And that was all across the media. And for the listeners to have a look at that, even that moment towards the back end of my career, not giving my best even at the back end of my career, and it really comes back to taking ownership, responsibility, and actually really stopping the bullshit and really making better decisions to be better and to be at your best. If that's sort of, try not to overcome, but that's what I sort of look back on during those years. You ask my wife. I wish I can get my wife on here now, but she's working for YAKKA. Even for her, she goes, it's like you're a total different person to what you were during those years. I always knew you had, you were better than that. And, it's just, I guess, experiences and what we go through.
It's interesting because as you're speaking, you're reminding me of the energy that exists as we go about our days, as we go about negotiating. See, sometimes people think that life and negotiations is almost a mathematical equation where you do this and this, you get that result. But that's not necessarily the case. And there's a lot of energetic factors that are at play. And in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Brazilian culture, I understand there's a principle known as Ginga. And a butchered definition of what Ginga is all about is if you know about the global game of football and soccer and you see the Brazilian football team, they're very flamboyant. And a really good example of this, I think, in the modern day, and some might disagree, but I think a good example is Neymar. But Neymar also has a real party side to him. He through this potentially destructive side, has been able to channel this kind of energy into the right direction and still be able to produce overall when it matters on the field. And I wonder if part of this and part of your football journey is almost like an example of having the right infrastructure around you, particularly as a young man playing sport and negotiating out there in the world, to enable you to still have an artistic young man journey, if that's a stage of life that you're in, but have some frameworks around you to really help you channel that energy. Because sometimes if people become too disciplined and too focused and boring, they can lose out in the art form that it takes to really negotiate or produce great sporting results. So we need to be able to apply this balance, I think, of the strict frameworks as well as natural flair. And if you get that balance right, I think you can achieve amazing negotiation outcomes and perhaps sport outcomes as well.
Yeah, and you're right. I guess it's the framework, and it's also having and being disciplined in certain areas where you know that, like you said before, the balance. The balance is the key, right? Is it okay to go out and to have a few drinks or do certain things, but you have it under control where it's not going to impact how you turn up on Monday and give your best at training, to work on areas in your game that you know you need to work on, and you've got all the energy and you feel good and you can do that. but not if you turn up and you're not feeling the best. You got a lot of things going for you. You physically don't feel good. You've had a big weekend where you don't get the opportunity to get that best out of that session, to work towards that performance, to that 80 minutes on the weekend that you need to work towards. And it's clear, we always hear all the time, the game is always a game of inches. And what those inches look like is those inches at training when no one's watching, those inches of like pushing out that little bit extra because you're going to get that little bit more out of it. And that's what leads you to get better and better, and you work towards your best when you're on the paddock. And you look at the best of the, not even just in NRL, AFL or any sporting code, you're always your top athletes. They have that little bit, like you said, that little bit of flamboyance, the ones that can just, go for the big plays and back themselves, but they also have that professionalism of working extremely hard, harder than others, and always addressing the gaps in their performance to get better. That's what, like I said, going back to what I shared earlier, I just felt like my career, and we always go through life and we have regrets, and you don't want to have regrets, but you have times where you could have got a lot more out of it. And I definitely look back on those times and I wish I grew up quicker. I wish I looked at my ego and looked at myself and actually took ownership of like my behaviour at certain times. That's just the truth, unfortunately.
And you mentioned playing at different clubs and different contracts, being involved and everything. What's it like as a young fella being involved in that kind of a negotiation from that contractual perspective?
Yeah, no, it's obviously, it's all that lack of, especially when you go into it. My first contract was at Storm, but I was only a school kid at that stage. But I went to Canberra Raiders and made my debut in a bigger contract. So I just, to be honest, all I thought about was the numbers on the contract and what that looked like and what that looked like for my lifestyle, coming from nothing and having this money. And my first contract actually was, I wanted to go and buy a Holden Maloo ute. I didn't know, like, if a V8 ute, personalised number plates, leather seats, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to go to the races and shout my mates. I wanted to get on the drink and party. That's what was my mindset for my first contract. That's all I thought about. As I had a partner, my next contract, I started to think about my future, more so buying property, saving, just from more education. And there's actually talk about negotiations, right? When I was at the Dragons, my wife was, we just had a newborn, my little girl. And at that stage of my career, again, a lot of it comes back to the footy time, is just me. But in that stage of my career, I was just out of control. I was really struggling off the field, behaviour-wise, drinking just a little bit. My wife wanted to go back to her family in Canberra. So I rang my manager. I said, my wife's leaving me. She's going back to Canberra. Can I try and backflip on my contract here at the Dragons and go back to Canberra? So that's what we were going through, the negotiations of me going back to Canberra at that stage. And again, my wife she had enough and I wanted to get back there. So we're going back and forth. But at the time at Canberra, Ricky Stewart was the coach, and it's funny, I can talk about it publicly now. I don't really have much to do with league as much, but I was trying to tell him that I was coming back. I wanted to come back and play at Canberra, but at that time, Steve Price at the Dragons got sacked, and a new coach come in, Mary McGregor, and I got along good with him. He was a good man, and he was the assistant coach, and he goes, "Tom, I want you to stay." But I'm already on the phone talking to Canberra going, I'm coming back, and they were working out the money to make sure I could go back for the money that we wanted to go back for. And so I went back and forth, and I'll share it. But at that time, I had to play a game of like going back to them and going, hey, I want to come back. But then Dragons were trying to keep me. So I was back and forth working both camps of where I was going to go. And I was waiting on the other to get the money for me to go back, because if they didn't get to where I needed to, I wasn't going back. So I'm like, yeah, I'm coming. Yeah, I'm staying back. or negotiating. And I went to a former teammate's birthday party, Terry Campese, and it was his 30th. Went back there and I was at one of the bars and I had a few beers, and Ricky come up to me, he goes, "Mate, I'm not getting effed around anymore. The deal's off the table. Say goodbye to the deal." And so I lost that. So thank God Dragons come through what I need them to come through with, and I end up staying at Dragons. But that was negotiating, working both things, and getting stuck in a very tricky situation purely because my wife's like, "I've got to get back to my family. You're out of control." And then, anyway, it worked out, and I I stayed obviously at Dragons. I got in to see some professional help with the support of the Dragons and the NRL, and addressed what was going on, I guess, and stayed there.
It's a really interesting story you share, and I think it's a common example of something that can come up in negotiations, which is where, on the one hand, you want a particular deal to come through. On the other hand, if that deal doesn't come through, you don't want to be left in the dark, so you need to be able to keep something else open on the table. And so as you're continuing those negotiations and discussing with two and perhaps even more, three or more sometimes, different options, I think one of the challenges people experience is how to keep the integrity in place as those various options are remaining open. And something that I think can really help people is to allow the different people know of the other options that you're exploring. You don't need to keep that a secret. And it's interesting as well, because sometimes when they know that you're having further discussions and there's other options you're looking at, sometimes that in itself can encourage them to make more exciting and better offers to you as part of that negotiation process.
And that was probably, looking back on that, and being even younger, I would have been 26, 27 possibly at that time. I can't remember exactly, but around that stage, again, I wish it was more open and honest, because Ricky's a champion person and a champion coach, and especially Mary, but I felt like I was in a position where I wanted to wait to see if the best option for myself at that time. You know, I had my wife and my newborn at the time, but it was back and forth, and I just didn't know where I was or what I was going to do with my life at that stage. So it was just a messy time. But that was probably the most, I don't know, the biggest negotiation period of my career at that time, I guess.
For sure. And I think it's also important to have an empathetic perspective on ourselves in our past negotiations, because people aren't perfect. And so it's often the case that when you look back at things, you can often think, oh, gee, I wish I had have handled that differently or handled that differently. But the thing is, we need to be able to forgive ourselves and often other people involved in various negotiations, because you're not perfect, they're not perfect. And I think that if we can separate and keep people above the mind of a problem, then that can help us through forgiveness, which needs to sometimes happen after the negotiations are done and dusted.
Yeah, I agree, and having that integrity too. Like, I'm big on the integrity side of things, as we've experienced recently with our conversations on something else. And I always want to back myself and do the right thing by people, and also do the right thing for myself as well. So it was just one of those stages of my career where it was a little bit messy all around, really, and I didn't know what I was doing or where I was going to end up at that period.
One of the reasons why I wanted to start yarning about your football career, even though you said you didn't really want to start there, and I appreciate you going into this with me, brother, is the segue into what you learned as a young fella and how you've carried some of these lessons forwards into the amazing work you're doing these days in your family, community. And you're right, something that you said to me recently, paraphrased, was along the lines of, hey, brother, this isn't all about the money. I've never gone into this for the money. It's about purpose. It's about mission. It's about service of others and community. And so I feel like this is such a strong point of segue, because as you were sharing these contractual negotiations, the young version of Joel was looking at the dollars as a primary motivating factor. Yeah. Does this mean that you've learned from those earlier days, and you're through those experiences, you've grown into a man who's very aware of what negotiations and outcomes are
Yeah.
really important to you.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And like I said, that period, all those experiences and those lessons have really shaped me into the person I am today. And I have got things wrong so many times, and that's where I didn't back myself or that gut feeling or where I am my integrity and who I wanted to be and you know, like you just mentioned before, like I got an opportunity to go into a business, but I've always said to myself that it should never be about money for me, because I feel like if it's about money, it's not going to get the best out of me. I'll lose interest in it, and that's just purely who I am. So even around the stuff I do with YAKKA, it was purely because my experiences growing up, seeing people growing up in homes where no one was working, where no one was, you know, what comes off the back of that, you know, and that's why I've turned down, you know, the one we recently, and you're going to look over a contract for me. I just shut it down because it just didn't sit well with me. I thought about it. It was going to be a good money opportunity, but I just didn't sit with me. And at the end of the day, I want to do I'm at that stage now where I just want to do what sits right for me and where my heart is.
Yeah, I think that's such a wise decision-making process that people can really learn from, because sometimes people can enter negotiations into contracts even though in their gut they know that the other parties to the contract aren't really aligned from that values perspective as to where that person's coming from. And
Yeah.
I always say to clients that the most important part of any deal-making process, any contract that's ever written, has to begin with those early discussions, early alignment and commonality between yourself and your organisation and the parties that you're doing that contract with. Because you might, as an alternative, end up with the most well-written contract ever. It will cost you a ton to get there, because the negotiations where you don't see eye to eye will involve heaps and heaps of work from the lawyers that are working with you in the process. But then what happens is you end up with a document that's beautiful, signed, but then almost inevitably problems will strike as a result of that problem that should have been seen in the very beginning, which is, do those values align? Are you on the same page in terms of what you want to be achieving here and what they want to be achieving? And I also think you're spot on, brother, in terms of, I think that when we serve well, when we do what we really meant to be doing and we're working on something that really means something to us and that greater purpose from the core, then through adding great value out there for others, the money follows. And sometimes people can make the mistake of looking at it the other way around.
Yeah, and that's something that I always wanted to be, you know, I guess back myself, but do what's right for me, because as we know, money and all this, it comes and goes, and we're going to get to a stage in our life where we look back and we look at what's left behind, what impact we've done, what lives we've had an impact on, what their grandkids and great grandkids, and what that's going to look like. And I guess I'm very strong on that, and you know, the reason I've got YAKKA going, why I put so much time and effort into what we've been doing, because that's where I want to be. When it's all at the end, I want to say, you know what, I made decisions not about money, not about anything else, but what was right and what I wanted to do and make an impact on this place.
And so nowadays you do a lot of work out there working in community with young kids.
Yeah.
And in a way, you could say that some of the work you do through YAKKA is helping out there in community negotiate better outcomes.
Yeah, negotiate with himself, the biggest thing, and sometimes that's what we need to do. You know, with what we learned, our learnt behaviours, you know, you know, and that's probably a starting point for a lot of them as well. You know, actually, you know, silence the noise. You know, negotiate the best position for them to move forward with. And again, I went into this purely because I had other opportunities and had other business opportunities, but I just, going right back to why I got YAKKA going and why I do it and why we made, it's because I experienced it. I know what it's like on the other side, and that is where the passion and the heart comes from. And that's why these other business opportunities that come down, I couldn't see myself getting up and getting excited and throwing the time and the effort and sacrificing time away from my family. Now I've got a beautiful family here on the Gold Coast. you know, I've got a little, you know, I'm away from them all the time purely because what I'm doing out there and the stuff that we're doing for YAKKA, and I guess it's trying to help others believe in that as well.
So what you're speaking about is knowing the why, having really strong alignment with that why, and then that being fuel for the work that we do as we go about negotiating our days, negotiating out there in community, and being really strong in that place.
Yeah. And that's exactly what it is. I guess it's understanding yourself, and I guess I reckon the biggest thing in life and what I've learned in my time is, you know, sometimes having a good look at ourselves and where we sit and who we want to be, where we are and who we want to be, and I guess I've had to do that many times, but it took a lot longer than it should have. But you get to that point now where you've got is a lot of wisdom, you got a lot of lessons, and you want to give that to others, and that's why the stuff that I do now is probably doing a big part of that, and it's all around that negotiating with yourself and the noise that can be around you in some environments.
Theme that comes up regularly through negotiations is having yourself in that best possible place so that you can negotiate externally powerfully.
Yeah.
Because if, as you're saying, if you don't have that clarity of place within yourself, if you haven't negotiated properly within yourself to begin with, then how can you possibly negotiate with others? What are some ways that people can actually develop that level of resilience and empowerment to be able to come from a place of internal negotiation?
And you're spot, it's around the mindset, but it's also the biggest thing about the mindset and putting yourself in the best position to negotiate the best outcome is having a calm mind. Having a calm mind, and to have a calm mind, it's around lifestyle choices. It's around the people that you are surrounded with. You know, what mentors, what support do you have around you? What people do you have there that are actually going to help you negotiate the best outcome when you go into that situation? And like I said, yeah, the biggest thing that I've, you know, to give myself, I guess, put myself in the best position and to get the best outcome is having a calm mind. And a calm mind is an informed mind. A calm mind is actually knowing where you can leverage off certain positions and how you can sort of put yourself in front of where you need to get the best outcome in that negotiation, I guess.
It's awesome. You've shared so much amazing wisdom with us, brother. I appreciate your vulnerability. I appreciate what you've provided to myself and all the listeners today. Are there any final words of wisdom that you would like to share before we wrap this one up?
No, it's been good. We've gone a little bit back into the sporting days, but like I said, a lot of the stuff to get yourself into a position to negotiate and to get the best outcome for yourself or for your family or for your business or whatever situation that is. Again, it's around a calm mind, but also understanding that environment, that situation, and to get yourself into the best position. And a lot of that is around, I guess, your lifestyle choices, you know, where you are sitting, the people you have around you, and the support you have around you as well to get you into that negotiation and get the best, you know, result.
And if anyone wants to work with you and YAKKA, how can they do that?
Yeah, reach out. We're on socials. Again, we're only a small business, and I've only just under 3 years since I've been going. But yeah, we've been doing some great things. We're in rail, civil, construction, doing a lot of training, and now horticulture, which is great. But yeah, reach out. Yeah, love to have a yarn.
You're amazing, brother. I love your story. I love the work that you do, and thanks for sharing so much about resilience and helping us become powerful with our own internal negotiations.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Remember to like, share, and subscribe to Rolling Through Negotiations podcast so we can bring you more great episodes just like this one. Us.